Are you ready for life-saving and life-changing hacks?
Was ist das?
20 minutes of the best top expert tips and hacks to make your life better. LifeHakx. Technology, business, multimedia, wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. LifeHakx. Every Sunday at 7 p.m. LifeHakx. LifeHakx.com. That's with a K and an X on Radio X. This is Mary Collins with LifeHakx Media, and I have the absolute pleasure to have Rebecca Roberts in studio with me today. Rebecca is an interior architect, which she's going to explain in a minute. So, first of all, how did you get into motivational productivity work?
Motivation, as beautiful of a word as it is, it can come and go.
Right.
And so it's about how do we create kind of this foundation within ourselves so that whenever these habits and patterns and things that we find ourselves getting stuck in, that we end up needing the motivation to overcome.
Oh, yeah.
It means that we're able to actually see them. Mm-hmm. And the moment that there's awareness to recognize what's going on, that's the moment when change is possible, because you can't change what you don't see.
Speaking of which, now, what exactly is an interior architect?
Well, so interior architect, as far as my background, is actually interior architecture. So I used to do consulting for essentially for workplace. So that was my main focus. Mm-hmm. What I recognized over the time is that while my initial focus was the design, I started noticing the human element in all of that so much more, because I kept seeing how the mindset was also affecting things, because we would have companies that would say, hey, we want to, create this kind of space because we want to have this kind of culture.
Right.
And what I was learning through lots of experience and through some hard times as well was a space can facilitate a culture, but it can't create one.
Oh, interesting.
So the culture is something that's very specific, and it takes mindfulness and awareness and conscious action, meaningful action, to be able to create and shape that. And then the world around us can help and support that. Mm-hmm. And so what I started recognizing was we're exactly the same way. There are times when we try and put everything in the outside world into its right place. We have the right relationship, the right job. We're making a certain amount of money. We're checking all the boxes that somebody along the way, or society or the culture, told us, this is how to get happy. This is how to feel fulfilled. This is how to feel free.
Right.
And yet we've checked all the boxes and it still doesn't feel right.
Doesn't work. Right.
And so it's about re-examining actually, okay, so you've been looking at all of the things on the outside, but actually it's paying attention to this, to your own blueprint, actually. Right. And so that's where this inner architect aspect comes from, is that each of us is the architect of our own lives. And we get to play with this space. Mm-hmm. But this space, what we create on the inside with our mindset, with the food that we eat, with how much sleep we get, with the way that we move our bodies, all of this kind of stuff, what we put into this is also affecting our resources and how we see the world around us.
Yeah, and how we communicate.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of which, now, what is one of the actions of something like inner architect coaching or motivational coaching? What does it involve?
One great place to start is with a small, and I'll say small to start with, a small habit or pattern.
Okay.
And it's about, okay, so we see the pattern. So the first thing is to create a little bit of space to remove the emotional aspect from it, because there's a lot of often frustration, agitation, annoyance, fear, all of this kind of stuff wrapped up in those habits. Mm-hmm. So it's about taking a step back from it and saying, okay, so without judgment for myself, let's see what the cycle is, and being really pragmatic with it. And then with a lot of grace for yourself, taking a moment to say, okay, what would be a pattern interrupt here? Mm-hmm. What's something that I haven't tried? Mm-hmm. And the most important thing is when you can engage your mind in curious exploration, that's when the doors start to open. Because the curious exploration doesn't say, I'm not going to move on something until I know that it works.
Right.
It says, I'm going to move on this and experiment. It's how to bring lightness without believing that something is not important. Like, let's say you're really struggling with your partner, right? If we're talking about love. And there's the tendency, there are times when you might be in the middle of one of those really stupid fights. You know the kind that I'm talking about, where halfway through, one of you or both of you recognizes, like, this has nothing to do with whether or not the toilet paper should be over or under. It's that there's a whole lot of other things in the background, but this is the stupidest fight.
Right.
Okay. But often there's the hesitation to go, well, I want to just say, can we time out? This is ridiculous. But instead, I feel like, no, but it's a fight. And I need to stay serious, and I need to stay in it. And that's one of these places as well. That plays with the patterns. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to know the truth?
Right. Exactly.
And the truth in a lot of this is like, can we own up to, sometimes it's about looking at those emotions specifically and saying, can I own up to the fact that I'm scared to death to start this? Can I own up to the fact that this is really tough? Or, I feel myself giving up on my relationship. Or all of these types of things. There are a lot of things that are tough, but they're there and they're true, whether we speak them out in truth or not. Even to ourselves.
Right.
And that's a big thing, that whenever you've got, especially a relationship that's even been around for a little bit of time, the thing is, the longer you haven't been communicating, the more, let's go with that analogy, the more pressure is built behind that dam.
Right.
And at first, when you decide to start making a change, you're going to feel it.
Right.
It's going to be intense. If you're starting out at the very beginning of a relationship going, you know what, we're going to be honest, and I'm going to say things that are really uncomfortable, but because I really care about you, that is a beautiful place to start. But the idea is that this will always be part of it. It's just how vulnerable we're willing to be, and vulnerable meaning courage to say what's true for us.
Life hacks. Why work harder when you can work smarter and live better?
Last night a DJ saved my life.
And so there's also something that you're known for, and it's called storytelling techniques. That sounds fun.
My favorite thing that I've been learning lately is to unleash people's ideas about themselves through storytelling.
Okay.
We have so much richness in our everyday lives that we just haven't opened our eyes to.
Right.
The hardest thing is to take that first step. It's the same thing with learning how to tell stories. Is the hardest thing is to get into the mindset of, I'm a storyteller.
Right.
Because we're all storytellers. It's like ingrained in our DNA.
Yes,
this is how we connect.
Right.
To be able to put some personal element, and it doesn't have to be something big. Oh my gosh, you'll never believe what really cool thing happened on the bus today. This old man sat down next to me and so, right? When you feel it, you're able to connect to something deep within another human being.
Yeah, I think this is a part of it that can be applied to the storytelling of a relationship. You, by simply observation, must make a big difference to storytelling, right?
And on the flip side of that, the reason why I often talk about creating a storytelling mindset is because to pay attention of the stories that you're telling to yourself. I'm not saying to slap a smiley face on everything.
Right.
But I'm saying we have a choice. And when we recognize that we have a choice, we're telling ourselves stories no matter what. If one is causing you suffering and you're planning on staying in the relationship, but you're just planning on suffering through it, why not tell yourself a story that's actually supportive of creating a cool relationship?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And actually, that's the biggest thing that I hear from a lot of people with relationships is that, well, he doesn't do this or she doesn't do that. They're not emotional enough, or there's always something wrong. And I said to people, well, instead of looking at something wrong, think about the fact that you're different, and that if that person doesn't want to show a certain kind of affection, then you show that affection. That's how they learn. That's how children learn. So that's how animals learn, right? Sorry to say this, but this is a fact that if somebody isn't emotionally talkative, then find a time where you can feed them and get them talking because they're happy, because they like food, right? It's a psychological thing, and it seems it's like basic common sense that if you're training a dog to do something and it takes a snack or a click of a button, why on earth would men be different? I'm just saying, you know,
and women.
We
We can train each other.
Exactly. A compliment. What a compliment will do for a woman, what a really nice dessert will do for most men, you know? So why not?
Yes.
So this is perfect. I mean, talking about now the fact that, you know, one can learn to give themselves some space, look at their situation in a different light, and have a really positive narrative.
Yes.
Could make a really big difference. So this is, you know, part of the interior architect programming that Rebecca Roberts is sharing with us today. So let's talk about a top hacks of how to get our interior architect on.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, there's the interior architecture part, which is the design aspect of it, and then there's the inner architecture part, which is this element that takes it kind of away from the outside space and brings it all the way inside. So it's really looking at ourselves as something that is not necessarily static, but something that we have the potential to explore, both our mindsets and the way that we handle our bodies and that we handle our emotions, and that those aren't set, but there's things that we can play with. There are things that we can reorganize and restructure to help us function a little bit better and a little bit more free in this life.
Perfect. So, hey, if you think that organizing a room and changing around the furniture is fun, wait till you get started with Rebecca on how to reorganize yourself, your internal self. So we were talking about, you know, getting motivated, and you've got some fabulous videos posted about this, including on LifeHakx Media on our Facebook page, which are just simple 2-minute maximum videos that kind of say, hey, these are the steps you need to take to get going. Yeah. When it comes, what would one of your main sort of, and you mentioned storytelling as one of the techniques that's used, you know, being a bit more vivid in how you think of your situation or you think about what you're dealing with, and expressing yourself differently because of the way you process those thoughts. What else would you say for, like, instance, mental health? Because I think that's something we kind of started to touch upon, but we didn't really. How does one stop habits that are unhelpful?
That's an excellent question, and there are so many different angles that we can come at. I would actually love to talk about two things.
Okay.
Because there's one that is highly tangible, very, very, very basic, and then there are some that are more on exploring the mindset. So the really basic one that I have is one that, from my own experience, when I am in a place where I'm feeling very stuck or very frustrated, it's one of the last things that I normally want to do. But movement is one of the most powerful things that we can do.
Okay.
Meaning, it doesn't have to be push yourself hard to go exercise, but there are times when our bodies signal to our minds how we can support ourselves, and there are times when our mind signals to our bodies. So, for example, when we're feeling stuck, because many of the mental health issues that we suffer from, anxiety, frustration, depression, all of these different aspects, many of them are rooted in feeling stuck, feeling like we don't know where to move, there's an uncertainty, and there are times when literally just going for a walk, doing some stretching, like literally signaling, allowing your body's movement to be something that starts to move actually your thoughts, because you have control over this body. At least most of us do, and if we don't all have it in every way, we've got it in at least a few ways.
Right.
You know? And so it's about, okay, so how can I start to utilize my body as a signal to my mind, hey, I have the power to move. So maybe there's also the potential to shift that mindset.
Excellent.
Right? So one is physical movement, and with that also, of course, paying attention to the food that we're putting into our bodies, because a lot of times, there are actually so many times where what we're suffering from is actually a food issue. And I'm not saying it's an allergy or even something that, our bodies can't process, but there are certain times when our bodies just go, hey, this is not really working for me.
Right.
And we end up feeling that in our emotional states.
Yes.
Right?
They say there's quite a lot of connection to sugar addiction.
Massive.
And your gut and the way you actually behave, right? Like you can become very depressed, very sluggish, whether if you eat the wrong things that your body cannot digest properly, your stomach can't, or your intestines.
100%. And there's actually, I'm certain I'm going to mess this up. So if anybody wants to correct the statistics, but there's something like we underestimate our gut.
Yes.
Right? And I think there's like the serotonin receptors in our guts. It's like 90% or something like that of the receptors or the indicators or something like that of serotonin in our bodies happen in our guts.
Really?
Right?
Wow.
Serotonin, like that's one of those ones of the happiness cocktails, right? That just make your body feel amazing. But we just haven't explored this so much. And so now more and more it's starting to come out. And I'm not saying you have to change your whole eating habits. I'm not saying you have to go vegan, vegetarian, whatever it might be, or meatitarian. I have no idea.
Carnivorous.
Yes. But it's to pay attention to what your body tells you after you eat something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to probably tick a few people off, but, at the beginning, whenever you're about to eat a pizza, what is the sound that everybody makes? Oh, pizza. Oh, we're going to order the pizza. After everyone has finished devouring the pizza, what's the sound that everybody makes?
I need to go to the toilet.
Yeah, that, right? Like if we and we laugh about it and we can be light about it, but
it's serious.
Foods that make us feel gross after we finish eating them, our bodies are trying to speak to us.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing as well with the mindset, right? It's bringing additional awareness. It's can we start to be aware of what's going on? Because most of the things that we're struggling with are not things that we don't know. Yeah. We know that eating tons of sugar is probably not the best thing for our bodies. We know that movement is something that generally is beneficial to our health.
Yeah, even with after operations now, they're saying the doctors want you to get up pretty much immediately within hours and start to move around. It's better for you.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's to look at the reasons why we're not doing what is so obvious that we should be doing. And this is back to those patterns and those habits, right? And this is where we can start to look at our mindsets and say, okay, pattern interruption. Okay, so maybe it's that I'm waiting until the time that I actually feel like doing X.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the time that I feel like working out. Maybe you're not ever going to feel like working out at the beginning. But the same thing, if we can work with not necessarily delayed gratification, but if we can pay attention to the short game and the long game, then when we might have to have those difficult conversations with ourselves where we say, okay, so right now it's cold outside. It's raining. I don't feel like putting on the rain jacket and going for a walk. But do I know that after that walk, I will feel so much better?
Exactly.
And the rest of my day will be energized because I've actually taken this 30 minutes for myself. Yes. Okay. Get over the hump and go. Just move.
And like you said, it's a case where we're completely sabotaging our futures because we want that instant gratification, or we want to simply go from A to C and forget about the B in the middle.
Yes.
And what you're saying is to get to C, you kind of got to start with A and continue through, or at least I'm
it can be beneficial.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm saying.
Get through it.
Because there are times when we're actually, and that's assuming that we actually start with A. Right? Most of the time, what's happening is when we're struggling with something, we're thinking about A.
Right.
And we then think about B, C, and D. And then we never start with A.
Right.
Because we've already convinced ourselves that the whole cycle will be too frustrating. So in this way, that's why I'm saying it's important to look at both the long game and the short game, right? Can we have an awareness of, if I do this, the benefits are greater than the input that it takes? Yay, okay, move. But can I also look that if I look too far ahead to the actions that I'll have to take, I'm going to keep myself from actually moving.
Right.
So just taking a moment, and this plays into really that second piece that I was thinking about with mental health, is bringing some awareness. Often it's about coming back to that space making, creating a bit of distance, slowing down, because we're trying to move so fast, because now we've started to get ourselves nervous, right? I shouldn't be taking this long. Oh gosh, it's been 6 weeks that I've been trying to figure this out. I need to start pushing. And so we start putting pressure on our minds. We stop giving ourselves grace. We start increasing the judgment. You know, somebody smart would have figured this out by now. All of this. And we start with this massive dialogue. This is where anxiety comes from, right? Is the storytelling that we're having inside of our heads is perpetuating a chemical response that is then perpetuating the feeling of not feeling okay, which is then increasing the storytelling. It becomes really nasty cycles. And so sometimes it's about saying, okay, like just a few deep breaths to create a little bit of space. Shut your computer. Take a moment to just be with yourself. And this is often something that we're really struggling with. Because now, with the iPads, with the phones,
social media,
with all of this kind of stuff, we're not with ourselves very often.
And the creative genius that should be happening on the internet is turning into, well, they're creative memes. Some of them are hilarious. But really, does anyone need to look at kittens for 2 hours? Really? Come on. I know it's really fun. Instant gratification of cuteness. But ultimately, how many people aren't doing what they should be doing because they're being distracted? And it's easier, isn't it, to be distracted than it is to actually deal with your own issues.
In the short
term,
term,
own self.
Absolutely. But we end up kind of shooting ourselves in the foot again and again and again. And again, with this, if we can have a degree of lightness, right? Because what our mind feeds off of, our mind, like I was saying before, is designed to keep us safe, right? So if we break it up, let's see the words that I want to use because I want to be careful. So the identified self, right? The one that says, my name is Rebecca Roberts. I'm an interior designer turned, coach and speaker and all of this. The one that wants to hold on to all of those labels is the one that wants to keep me safe. Because the labels are like, oh, I know where I stand, right? So what is the biggest threat to safety?
Ego.
Change.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And so, but there's another part of us that is built, like the core part of us is built for expansion. It's built for growth. It's built for curiosity. And when we're staying in that stuck state, we are not honoring and living up to that deeper part of ourselves that is meant to grow and learn constantly. It's not just for children. To learn
and it can
and
fester.
Grow.
It'll fester, right? It'll not go anywhere. So for mental health, one of your main focuses would be get up and move. That's the key. Even if it's a tiny bit of movement, even if it's something simple like a quick walk around the block or some stretching or some the pirouettes across the living room.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Just get moving and breathe.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds like fabulous mental health advice for this specific podcast.
Cool.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's been an absolute pleasure. We look forward to having you on more of our LifeHakx media feeds. And speaking of which, where does one look for your motivational and, storytelling coaching theme?
Probably the easiest way to get started, just because everything's there, is the website. So www.rebeccaroberts.com. And there you can see, I like to do these little videos that are all of these little life hacks, actually.
And on LifeHakx.
Yes, I call them inner architecture minis.
Okay.
Try and keep them short. And that's a great way to dive in and start getting some inspiration.
So definitely check out Rebecca's website. And also we will do our best to post things on LifeHakx Media on our Facebook and Instagram page. And on LifeHakx.com, you will hear our podcasts with Rebecca. It's been a pleasure, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been brilliant.
What would you like to hear more of on LifeHakx Media? Tell us what experts you want to hear from. Write into lifehacks@gmail.com. Top expert tips and hacks to make your life better. LifeHakx. And now let's see what our Insta chef, Daniel Diver from Ireland, has for us today.
Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I am making Guinness bread. It's super easy to make. It's just a matter of mixing a few wet and dry ingredients together, and it makes a really lovely bread. I love it for breakfast. It's so good with a softly poached egg. Anyways, we'll get things underway.
And that's all we have time for today, but to catch up with Daniel's Guinness bread recipe and so much more, including Laura Newberry's special offer for a free week during the month of March for her Back to Fitness app, Pain Free Living. You can find out this and more on lifehakx.com. Thanks for listening. LifeHakx. LifeHakx.com. That's with a K and an X on Radio X.